All right, back again with some more Breya. Got some fun games for you here, I think. No changes to the deck list. It's just been playing like a well-oiled machine here. The list, if you want to get it, is also available on Tapped Out. You should be able to find the link in the comments as well. So we'll go ahead and run through some games, and we'll take a look and see what happens. So this is the last few days here. I tried 4 games on the 25th. I was pretty high on medicine and always playing super poorly. I ended up losing a game where I just kept a hand that was totally unkeepable. Like nobody in their right mind would keep it, but I wasn't exactly in my right mind. Played a couple more games. You can see there's a huge gap in delay between these games. A lot of it was me just sitting there kind of drooling. So I said, all right, that's enough. Medication and magic don't seem to mix. So came back on the 27th and played. I'm going to go through a couple of them. The first one against Uo, and then I'll hit the 31st and the 2nd as well. So Uo here was playing Sadisi, and I've got a pretty acceptable hand here. I'm not sure why I fetched right away, but I guess that's fine. Looks like I'm going for Tithe Trick over Stoneforge, because I want to keep developing, and of particular importance is making sure that I get Dak Fading down ASAP so that I can deal with that Soul Ring. So very nice right there. Snag. Thank you. Opponent's got a Reservoir in play, but not too much else going. I'll throw away Mox Diamond and a Hallowed Fountain. I have better things than lands to make mana with. And I go fetch a Skull Clamp off Trinket because I'm going to try to rebuild my hand here. It goes for a Greed, which I'm just going to remand for tempo purposes. And at this point, I get to vamp and draw the card that I've Vampiric Tutored for. And throw down a Skull Clamp, Mind Twist my opponent, smack, and pass with Dak Fading threatening to grab their Aetherflux Reservoir. Opponent top decks a Mana Crypt off the top, throws down a Sadisi and fetches a card, but I'm able to go ahead and take their Crypt, Stoneforge into Sword of Feast and Famine, and the card that they just tutored for is going to hit the bin. And my opponent gets Necro. And you don't see, I don't see anyway, oftentimes opponents making good choices when the choices are not obvious. So a lot of times people make good choices, but they make obviously good choices like running Soul Ring in their deck. What you don't see is an opponent doing something like playing Necropotence in a mono black deck. Don't ask me why. If you've been watching the channel, you know that that card is almost unbeatable. But so I congratulated Uo on fetching out the Necro here, because that just showed me that this person knows what they're doing in this game, and I thought that was pretty cool. So we ended up chatting a little bit, and I think he ended up subscribing to the channel. So if you're watching, again, awesome. And then contrast that to this opponent here, Nico Bolas 132. So this opponent loses and then goes on tilt, and I'll explain that in a moment. So this player is playing Chromium the Mutable, so it's a can't be countered type thing. And I barely lead off with anything at all. A Mox Opal, and my opponent concedes and kind of gets upset. And then joins another game against me. So I figured, okay, well, I don't know, maybe they're having a bad day. Like, I don't know what that was about, but okay. And they bring their Animar deck. So I'm going to pause. So basically, when I played the Mox, my opponent said, oh, well, this... Basically, they conceded and said, well, I'm going to go get my good deck, is what it amounts to, right? Like, I'm not going to beat you with my Chromium deck. I'm going to beat you with my Animar deck. So we start a new game, and they lead off with Soul Ring. So this is going to be a fight right off the get-go. And we'll see how it plays out. I decided not to Preordain or Seal because I thought I would need to use Plow. I think it was a mistake in hindsight, but, you know, choices we make, right? So first of all, I'm going to get the Soul Ring off the table. Opponent's gotten to use it, had 2 turns in which they could have taken advantage of that card. Opponent gets Animar out, and hits me with the Farhaven Elf. So I'm going to have to tutor and pass. I've got a mana leak, so I might be okay. Opponent then runs out Beast Caller Servant, or Savant rather. Mashes me for 4. And plays a Song of Freyalise, which I counter, which probably didn't need to be countered, honestly, but I go ahead and preordain, grabbing the land, and then play the Toxic Deluge that I tutored for. And clear their board, and my opponent cannot replay their commander this turn, and flips out on me and totally loses their stuff. And then proceeds to join and concede. Like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 times. So I end up going 10-0 or 7 times. So I end up going 9-0 against this opponent in minutes, and laughingly, I guess, pumps up my win rate. So I guess there's something. So thanks for that. Anyway, it was an amusing outcome, but it was an unfortunate one where I guess his good deck didn't perform at the level that he had expected. So anyway, whatever. There's bad behavior out there. So if you see this person, you may want to watch out. So Kaios 1998 is the last person I played. After that kind of time waster there, I played one more and then decided I was good for the night. So we'll run through this game real quick. This game was against Zakama Primal Calamity. So basically, this is a game where I have to keep my opponent off their commander's mana. Basically, it's a game of land destruction, right? Opponent is ramping. Fetches up a mountain, I believe, yep. So I'm going to continue to dig for my mana. And grab myself a trinket so that I can get rid of those 2 cards that I didn't want to see there. So we're about even in mana so far. Opponent's ramping again. Claim into growth, though. So they just dropped 3 more mana sources into play. I'm able to put 3 into play myself with the land and the Soul Ring. And then run out at the ready and make a construct and pass. So if they go for a commander here and don't have Cavern of Souls, I can at least deal with that. Instead, they go for Zendikar Resurgent, which is a personal mana flare that draws cards. Certainly cannot allow that to come into play. So for my next turn, I Imperial Seal and then Dak Faden into the card, which is Winter Orb. Kill their bird with the construct I pre-staged last turn and drop the orb. And with that, my opponent scoops. So fortunately, I don't need a billion mana to run, but if I did, I've got a pretty good chunk already. 2, 3, 4, 5 mana. I can run basically with 4 mana per turn against my opponent's 1 here. So probably right to concede, but at that point. But that definitely would have been a problem for me if I hadn't been able to put together some mana disruption pretty quickly at that point. So it's funny because I'm going to play Mana Lord next. This was yesterday. But it's funny because this deck runs it wants a lot of mana, but it runs on very few. So the deck can play, for the most part, on 3 mana sources fairly comfortably, if it absolutely has to. But if it gets more, it does more things with it because of the way that it draws cards. So, okay, we got an insane start here. My opponent just scoops and doesn't even want to have anything to do with that. So, fair enough. What was their commander? It was Anafenza, the Foremost. Anyway, so like I was saying, if you actually take a look at the cards, 20, 36, 40, 50, basically 55 cards plus the land. So 87 cards cost 3 mana or less. And then of the ones that don't, you've got an X spell that you could play on 3 mana for 2 if you needed to, a Force of Will that's free, and then just a tiny little handful of cards that cost more than 3. So I think that's important to try to keep. You want to be able to do a couple different things in this format. I think you want to be able to produce lots of fast mana, disrupt your opponent, do something with the mana that you're producing, and be able to survive if you can't. if you can't produce all that mana. Kind of a tall order, but I think it's very doable. And if you tend to look at if you were to go back to the channel, for example, and look at the Edric deck, by the way, my opponent's playing Atali Primal Storm. So if you were to go back and look at the Edric deck, you'd see that it operates on a similar paradigm where most people try to put in a lot of beaters and stuff. The deck was loaded with tons of mana production and cheap interaction. All right, so I've got a Force of Will here. I'm going to run out Karn. I typically make a creature, but against Edley, it's so important that I do not allow their commander to get going. And I'm instead using Karn to develop at least that one turn. And there is a command tower hiding in the command zone, as well as a Felwar Stone. So I'm going to try to fetch up some extra mana. Basically, I'm going to use Karn to make sure that I don't miss a mana drop ever. Right, and then this turn I'm able to. My opponent makes a construct. I'm able to kill their construct and their Grand Dynamo, which takes out their Mirage Mirror. When it goes for Edley, I let it happen because I have Doretti in play. When I go ahead and hit a land drop with Karn, throw down Necro. Cryptic is commander back to his hand, and kill his Soul Ring with the ready instead of killing it with instead of Force of Willing it, right? So this way, what I can do is I Necro, and then if my opponent goes tap 6 out for their commander again, I get to Force of Will, but this time they don't have a Soul Ring in play, so on the next turn I can play Tezzeret the Seeker and then just go get one roll, and that should do it. Of course, my opponent's at 7 also, so if they were to tap out for their commander, they would just literally lose the game. Dead on board, right? So I could attack with, I could produce a token here, produce a guy here. So this would become a 5/5. So I'd attack for 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. My opponent would have to block the 5/5. Then, so they would take 6, and then Breya's special ability would finish them off. So opponent was dead on board, so they scoop and decide to play again. And this person was kind of putting the pro in their name because they took it. We had conversations, and with the attitude that the person had, it was actually really awesome because they were like, "Hey, that's really cool. I want to basically learn more about that deck." And so, person had like a very interesting response to the matches that we played, which I found to be quite cool. Like that, basically, that's the kind of thing that I would be thinking and doing myself if I, back in the day, like if I had never seen this deck or a deck like it. And I know that because when I saw the deck, that was how I responded. I was kind of like totally blown away by that style of Magic, and decided that I had to figure out what made it tick, right? So anyway, I'm just doing the deck style gross things here where I tutor for a Strip Mine, tutor for a Mind Twist. Deck Faden basically allows me to get whatever it is that I want, and continuing to hammer my opponent's mana base. Steal their Felwar Stone with Deck Faden, and then later plus up deck and use, what did I use? A Seal of Cleansing here. Yeah, so this game bugged out at the very end, but what happened was I had Strip Mine their land, and I think on this turn what I did was I ended up, there was a Vindicate somewhere. I found a Vindicate, and then I Vindicate, snap Vindicated or something like that, and and then eventually stole their cloak and left my opponent with no permanence at all. So we start a new game. As he's like checking out how this deck works and what's going on with it. And this one was against Italy again. And I've just got these, draws that would already be extremely good against anybody, right? So I'm going to go ahead and fetch here and get Jace going. Oh no, this is a game where I Vindicate Snap. I don't remember how that last one ended, but at any rate, it's somewhat academic. So I go get Force of Will, bounce their creature, go ahead and Vindicate, I believe, yeah, taking out a mountain. I've got Force, but I don't want to use it, but it's an option, right? And fortunately, I didn't have to there. And the plan is never to have to again, basically. So we're going to go Snapcaster Vindicate, take out another land. Is this game going to bug as well? Oh, don't tell me we're going to bug out. Well, as you can imagine, it wasn't... that's unfortunate. It wasn't that tough to figure out how to win this game, but I'm certain that at some point I ended up getting a disenchant for this and a expedition map, which allowed me to strip mine this. Because in this game, I remember my opponent ended up with like nothing, almost nothing in play, and I don't remember if there's a Yogg Will involved or what, but that was yesterday. All right, DR Trillionaire was this last game I have. So sorry that the games are kind of bugging. I wasn't sure that this was how good this recording was going to be, but I know that these games were interesting at any rate. So we'll get as much as we can of each one and then see what happens from there. So I'm playing against Kranko here. Or DR Trillionaire running a Kranko, and Kranko is not great when it doesn't get Soul or Mana Crypt, but because I have Jace going and a Winter Orb, I go ahead and fetch up Force of Will because I can afford to lose the cards here, and now I just want to go. I'm going for tempo, so every turn that I get to Jace is a turn that I'm winning, and if I can protect my board, then there's really no way my opponent can do much here. Since I have the Force of Will, I can actually afford to develop with the Mystic here. So I'll go ahead and do that because I want to pressure my opponent's mana source. Now I've got the combo of Sword of Feast of Famine and Winter Orb. My opponent, Blood Moons, I go ahead and just let that happen because it really doesn't have much of an impact on me this game. I'm going to go ahead and attack with Stoneforge here. Their ability to hose my lands with Blood Moons is inferior to my ability to hose their lands with Winter Orb. So that's what we do. So now I've got Winter Sword going. The Winter Soul Soldier. I don't know, something. Anyway, that's too cheesy. All right, so I'm going to copy the Sword of Feast and Famine, equip it. Go ahead and Jace and smash. And now I'm taking 2 cards per turn out of my opponent's hand. If I had anything I could do with just red mana, I would. So I float 3 here, untap, and untap my Grim Monolith. So there is something I could do with it, so that was kind of nice. When it goes for Chaos Warp, I just let it happen because they targeted Jace, and Jace has already won the game for me, and that's totally unimportant to me. If they targeted Winter Orb, I would have Force Willed, or Mox Diamond, or if they targeted the Talisman. But them targeting Jace with the Chaos Warp is no issue to me because now they have no mana, and after I attack, they have no cards, and I can't really lose that way. Of course, I got the Wayfarer off of that, which means I get to actually fetch up a basic island pre-combat, get that into play. Or I can fetch up a Strip Mine. I'd probably get the island, though, because until Blood Moon goes away, like a Strip Mine assumes that I would get rid of Blood Moon at some point. Until it goes away, it's just me fetching a mountain, right? So I just go get basic islands and run it that way. Anyway, opponent scoops it up there, and that was it for the 31st. Again, just not feeling great. I only had a couple of games there, and here we are on the 1st of February, and I have a few more. And I think these ones are a little bit more interesting, hopefully. You'll think so too. So anyway, I'm playing against Nico Bolas, the Ravager, and I've got a screaming start. So I go ahead and keep a copy artifact because 2 Soul Rings are better than 1. I'm going to brainstorm first and then play a fetch and get that copy down. I almost could have copied the Talisman there, but Soul Ring's just too good. And it turns out that I made the right choice here because it allows me to smash my opponent's hand and take a Vandal Blast out of their hand along with a couple of mana sources. My opponent then plays this completely baffling play in which they Mystical Tutor for Vampiric Tutor. So I just DT for Yogg Will and let them play their Vampiric Tutor, and then I think that they were having some mental math problems or something. They used Gary each Sanitarium. Each player draws and discards. To throw away their Cyclonic Rift that they mysticaled into Vampiric Tutored for, not realizing that you have to hold a card if you're going to use Garreach Sanctum and play the card that you got. I don't know if they thought that they could like draw it and then cast it in between discards or something. I'm not sure. First of all, Psych Rift they're a long way off from, and it certainly wouldn't have hurt me any. But yeah, it's a little baffling what was actually going on over there. So I guess they scooped maybe an embarrassment, or I don't know, but hopefully not too bad. We all make mistakes. Anyway, on my turn, I was gonna obviously Yogg-Will. I had to discard a card to the Garreach Sanctum, so I probably would have discarded the Treachery, and then I would have Yogg-Willed, played Mox Diamond, pitching Windswept Heath, and then replayed Windswept Heath and fetched, or one of the other lands. And then gotten to work with DT, Brainstorm, Preordained Impulse. I completely filled my hand up and locked the board down. At some point, probably fetching Winter Orb because of the way that the board had developed. So, anyway, Thiago066 jumps into a game with me after that and is playing Liliana Heretical Healer. I've got a nice quick start that needs a little bit of help to develop, but I have Vampiric Tutor, so I can give it that help. So I go get Soul Ring here, because I can play it, copy it. I could have done that with Mana Crypt and then sat on a counter, but then I would have had 2 Mana Crypts running, and I felt like, you know, there's not a lot Mono Black can do on turn 2 that I'm really concerned about. I played this a little bit strangely in hindsight, but it's okay. The way it worked out is fine. So opponent plays Liliana Heretical Healer. Now's the time to go ahead and clear the board for Deluge. Now I'm going to sit on Remand. Opponent recurs their Bloodghast and goes for a Thran Dynamo. That's the Remand target. Here I do my mana a little bit wrong, but it'll be alright, I guess. I Scalding Tarn, which is fine, but then I don't play Tezzeret here. Or do I? No, I guess I did play Tezzeret here. Okay, no, I did it correctly. So I run it out like that. Basically, the idea is I'm going to Spellseeker for the Swords to Plowshares and Winter Orb to lock down the board. And I've got the blocker to get in front of Tezzeret. So if my opponent does kill Spellseeker here, it's a bummer. Tezzeret dies. But then that means they spent their turn killing Spellseeker. And Tezzeret, I can plow the Bloodghast, and should be it. If my opponent can't kill it, then it's much, much worse for my opponent, of course. They can attack Tezzeret, at which point I'll chump block. If they don't attack, it's even worse yet, because I'll plow this thing and then fetch up a Clamp and draw some cards. But if they do attack and I block, that's fine. Then I get to sit on Swords to Plowshares, and I get to Tezzeret for 1 and go get Map, and use Map to go get Throne of the High City. Play Throne of the High City down. And so if you notice, I would have 1 to Swords, 2 for Map, and 4 for Throne. So I would immediately start drawing 2 cards per turn while under the Winter Orb, at which point, and then plow the Bloodghast, at which point my opponent is sunk. So, alright, I'm playing against Faden now, which is kind of cool because my avatar that I use is the Dak Faden. So we'll see if Faden can beat Dak Faden. And this opponent is playing Edgar Markov, Vampires. And I had a conversation with this player as well, and they were very cool. And hopefully, if they've, I think he was talking about possibly signing it, you know, joining the channel. So if so, then welcome. So basically, what I did was I used my hand was really good. So what I wanted to do was just use Karn, not to produce creatures, but to dig for mana. And my opponent actually ended up giving me a lot of mana sources, maybe not realizing that that's what I was digging for. But I do understand when your options are something like Mana Drain or Land Tax, you say, nah, here, take the land, right? It feels safer, but my opponent, and in some cases it might have been, but my hand was just way too good for that to work out for my opponent this time. So at any rate, I'm going to go ahead and drain this Living Crusade here, because that's going to slow my Jitte down. And my opponent gets a Boros Signet, love taps Karn over there. It's just not enough to get anything done. I'm going to go ahead and deploy additional mana sources, Breya, kill their commander, attack, get tokens, untap my lands, steal their Boros Signet, and basically lead my opponent with an impossible board. He did get Vampiric Hexmage, Vampire Hexmage, which would have allowed my opponent to immediately kill Karn or Dak Faden as they so chose. I would have recommended Karn at that point, most likely. But scoops it up, realizing the situation's fairly hopeless. Now, had the opponent not done so, I would have, had they made the play of killing Karn and not scooped, then I would have Mystical during upkeep and gone after Yawgmoth's Will, and then just replayed Karn anyway. So it wouldn't have worked out great for my opponent. I would have dacked before willing to get more cards in the graveyard to recur with, but yeah. All right, so next opponent is JK22. And usually against vampires, this opponent's playing Kynios and Tiro of Miletus. I've got an okay start with copy and impulse copy to help me out if my opponent gets a Soaring, but the start gets a lot stronger when I get turn 2 Dark Confidant. Of course, my opponent's playing red and white and could deal with it, but does not have an immediate solution. So with that in mind, I'm going to go ahead and play out the sword and threaten to start getting into their hand and producing extra mana next turn. My opponent can't seem to do anything about it, so I go ahead and equip the sword, play Expedition Map Swing, then sack the map after combat and destroy their two-color, basically kill their Soul Ring. Right, the Sanctuary is basically a Soul Ring that makes colored mana. And then I was about to play Pondra when my opponent just scooped it up. Says, oh no. So, I don't know. My opponent could have easily played their commander here, had they so chosen. But fine by me. I'll take it. Now, what I was saying earlier about vampires is usually against vampires. In the previous game I don't believe I Toxic Deluged, and normally you have to clear the board against them. So that was a game that went really well, but it went really well because I was able to get an active Jitte against them, which is basically a board clear as well. Against vampires, you've got to get some kind of board clear, typically. So, new game here. This is against Seagoat, playing Tajik, Blade of the Legion. Not a serious deck, of course. My opponent just hit me with a 1/1 on turn 1. It goes back to their hand. It's not great there. Runs out of Johnny Pridemate, and I'll go ahead and borrow that guy, put a sword on it. Before I can even finish doing so, my opponent just scoops. So, okay. I mean, I put sword on that thing, and then probably just play the Skull Clamp is what I would do here. Possibly Tithe, so I can play Breya next turn, but I like to get 2 cards of Tithe if I can. So I think just playing the Skull Clamp would have been fine, because what probably would happen is I'd be able to attack with a Pridemate and then Tithe into being able to play Breya on the next turn. So either way, so my opponent scoops, and I go against Lycoris 0. And this player is running Tali, and I mulligan twice because my opening hand just wasn't that exciting, and I like hands with a little bit of excitement to them. This hand is deceptively weak, but if I can find some mana, the mana drain should make this hand a lot stronger. And my opponent gets a creature that's going to let them play their Atali and give it haste soon. So I decided to go for Taxier over Crypt, and my opponent rituals out their commander and smashes. This is very, very bad news. So we're going to find out if Tax is good enough. Opponent was able to remove my Forbid from the game, but could not play it, of course. And then Vandal blasts a Felwar Stone, but not my Talisman of Progress, so I let it go. Opponent then runs out a Copy Artifact and a Lantern of Insight, and has bashed me twice with a Tally. 2 more hits and I'm dead. So I'm going to Impulse into Soul Ring, fortunately. Tax to shuffle because I don't like the top card of my library. He's got a Lantern of Insight, so I can at least see that the top card was not going to be helpful. I'm Carning to dig, and I have a Remand now sitting exiled from the game, trying to find... I need to find a solution to Atali. One of them plays Sword of Fire and Ice, which I have to mana drain, and smashes in and kills my Karn, I believe. Does a Force Shuffle with Lantern of Insight, He's Helm of the Host off of Atali. And then this is not correct. My opponent did not get a Gilded Lotus. They got something useless on my side. It was something they couldn't play. I don't remember what it was. It was definitely not a Gilded Lotus. So anyway, what ends up happening is that they attack and kill Karn. And then on my turn, I take 1 plus 2 more, but I have the mana drain mana, so I'm able to play Misty Rainforest, play my commander, use 2 from the... Oh, I guess I didn't take Ancient Tomb damage. I actually take 1 from the vault, play my commander, I take 1 from that. And then I run out, I spend 2 from the mana drain, sacking the vault and a flyer to shrink this. And I tap Soul Ring and sack the other flyer and Talisman to kill this thing. And my opponent plays on their turn a Paradoxical Engine, which allows them to untap all of their non-land permanents whenever they play a card. So that resolves. And then on my turn, I find a way to go get Winter Orb into play. And I orb them down. On their turn, an attack with Breya, and I grab something off Karn. And then on their turn, they play a non-creature permanent, untapping their mana vault and threatening to have... It puts them at 6 mana total. And then on my turn, I can't remember what happens, but basically, before my opponent can get to the 8 mana that they need to cast their commander, I think I actually I used Karn to grab this remand. So my opponent's looking at, like, if he gets to 8 mana, I'm just going to remand their commander back to their hand, and they're going to have to try again. And meanwhile, Breya is bashing them. And I think very quickly, like, my opponent loses. But it was an interesting game anyway. I thought it's a shame that it bugged out, but I thought it was a game that you would enjoy seeing. And because it was really close, like surprisingly close. Not because that commander is necessarily good, but because that commander plus a bunch of rituals and a card that gives it haste all combine at once, hitting me with a draw that's super slow. When you put it all together, it put me in a really tight bind. Much closer game than what it looked like at the end. Anyway, this opponent had played me earlier and decides to play me again. And if I remember correctly, I got first turn Dark Confidant against him previously as well. So turn 1 Dark Confidant here, and I'm able to get turn 2 Vindicate and attack. Turn 3, I go get Expedition Map, so I get to strip mine and attack. And my opponent gives up. He's like, no, forget it. I've had enough, basically. Which is awesome. I mean, I got to kind of time walk twice there. And when you have a Dark Confidant running, that's pretty good. I was down a card from the Mox, down a card from the Mulligan, but in 2 turns, all that was made up for. And so we put it together. My opponent has 8 cards, and I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And remember, they just drew for the turn, so that's the 8th card. So we're actually dead even on cards, but I'm way ahead on board. And yeah, that's it. So hopefully you enjoyed watching those games. I know that the replay bugs kind of take some of the fun out, and there wasn't anything too crazy going on, except for maybe the one with the Atali match there where I almost lost. I think at the end of that game, I actually ended the game at like 6 or something. But if I remember correctly, in the final sequence, what happened was Breya got a Jitte, and I ended up with a bunch of counters on it. And that was the point where my opponent scooped, because now that I remember, because if they had been able to get their commander into play, it would have immediately died to Jitte. And there was no way they could beat me, like going after my life total. So it was just a hopeless game at that point for them. So anyway, that's all I've got, though, for today's game. Watch out for that one guy. Whoever that opponent was, Nicol Bolas 132. Unless you enjoyed playing against opponents like that. And otherwise, thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.